everyone. My name is David Villar, and it's a pleasure for me to share with you this presentation that, as you can see, will try to say a few things on the environmental and community impacts of mercury pollution from artisanal gold exploration in Colombia. The objectives, briefly, are to highlight the environmental consequences of gold exploration in Colombia and why is mercury being used for artisanal gold mining. And secondly, we'll try to highlight the potential human health consequences of using mercury for gold extraction. And as you can see, direct human exposure through inhalation, that's the most common way how mercuries become exposed and get sick. Whereas for the majority of people, it is indirect human exposure, mostly through fish consumption, how we get exposed to mercury these days. And towards the end, we'll say a few things on the risk assessment procedures by some regulatory agencies, and also the risk of eating fish in some Colombian waterways. First of all, there are two different types of gold exploration. There is what's called industrial and artisanal gold mining. Industrial is done by very large multinational companies, wealthy. As you can imagine, it tends to benefit just kind of a few people that are at the top of our food chain, whereas artisanal miners is mostly done by poor people in undeveloped countries, and they rely on that activity for making a living. So they're not in the business really to get wealthy. What are the impacts of industrial mining? Basically, on this left picture, you can see they render vast areas of land completely lifeless, and with regards to the water, they create these what called tailing ponds, which are basically a cocktail of acid water, heavy metals, cyanide. In this case, you can see some cyanide barrels that were left to float on that murky water, whether inadvertently or on purpose, I guess who cares. But any creature that were to get close to one of those ponds and dare to take a sip of that water would no doubt endanger itself and may not survive to tell the story. Now this I don't know if we can really say anything positive about industrial mining, but I guess if everybody had a dream to ever go to the moon, maybe they can just take a visit to one of these sites and just enjoy a moon-like landscape, because that's what they look like. No need to get on a spaceship, I guess. Now, the artisanal miners are not less evil by any means. And here is an example of what we could call an aquatic ecocide, and it's taking place in the Dagua River, which is located in this red zone of the Colombian map. And gold was discovered in April of 2009, and at that point the river, from what I read, was kind of a nice, pristine-looking river. But unfortunately, in just a matter of a few months, in November of 2009 of that same year, there were 8,000 gold prospectors settled on the riverbanks in shacks. A picture from the air, 300 bulldozers working day and night, turning the riverbed in and out and changing the river course. You can pinpoint some of those bulldozers working down here. Another aerial view of the river. It's about 22 kilometers of totally unrecognizable river course. You can hardly tell where the main course of that river is no longer. Another aerial view, look at all these potholes scattered throughout the riverbed here. And if we take a close-up view of the operations on the ground, we can see those same potholes that we saw before from the air. People going on about doing their business here of washing out the sediments. And as you can imagine, working safety conditions are nothing but state of the art. Uh, but I bet you that everybody in the family that can wear rubber boots gets involved in that into that operation. Uh, Everybody except for maybe Uncle Sam that should have put an end to that madness before it even started. Look at this other side. Looks like we have a huge volcano crater that was made by those bulldozers. And look at this side of the riverbank, totally unprotected, and nothing really to hold it back, and just it could collapse and bury all these folks here in a split second. Avalanches and landslides take a lot of lives in Colombia every year. Mercury is used to separate gold from the river sediments, and that's illustrated here how they go about doing it. Either directly on pans they pour that elemental mercury, or they do it here on these platforms, and they mix all the elemental mercury with the sediments, and mercury has a very high affinity to bind precious metals, gold among other ones, and it will form an amalgam, which is kind of a solid pearl that is usually taken to these gold shops, where at least they have some way of burning and making sure that they're not exposed to the fumes of when mercury is released into the atmosphere. But many times they'll just do it right out on the open, as you can see on this other cartoon here. Here we have a daddy that is put the amalgam here on a pan, and he's trying to heat it up with a blowtorch. And before they do that, they'll probably congregate all the family around that pan just to enjoy the magic of mercury evaporating and gold staying behind, all shiny and sparkly and kind of ready to go to somebody's jewelry box or bank reserve, because unfortunately jewelry doesn't really have any other use these days. It's either used for jewelry or to make those gold bars. At least in the old times, if you had a bad tooth, they could take it out and maybe put a gold replacement. That would be nice, wouldn't it? That's no longer done either. Well, anyway, what are the potential consequences to the ecosystem of the Daguer River? And I have lighted here in yellow river floodings, because that's a major disaster that takes place in Colombia year after year. Just in 2010, there were 2 million people that were with severe housing damage from flooding, and most of that is truly taking place because of the widespread deforestation throughout the country. But in this particular case of the Daguer River, I think we could probably blame the sedimentation downstream of that mining site. And as you can imagine, the harbor at the Buenaventura city receives so much sediment that they need continuously to dredge that harbor to allow the ships to come in and out. And not to mention the loss of aquatic life to that river, and the mercury, which is not being recovered in the process of washing out the sediments, and it's just being released into the water. And also all those potholes that we saw before, those are excellent breeding grounds for mosquito swarms. And in that in that particular area, dengue and malaria are two deadly diseases. They take a heavy toll on the people, and I would not be surprised if they're going to have spikes of those two diseases taking place in the nearby towns. Here we have what's a website from United Nations. Mercury is a priority date for action by their campaigns, and you can go into their website and you'll see that they have a lot of modules that try to address some of the problems that are created by mercury, and how they can go about doing remediation or solutions. And the module number 3 is specific for mercury use in artisanal and small-scale gold mining. Well, we could well use some of that advice here in Colombia, because the situation, according to the experts from the United Nations that came and made a tour of some mining towns in 2010, they stated that Colombia is currently one of the world's top mercury polluters, with 50 to 100 metric tons of mercury, which is lost annually in the process of capturing gold. So Colombia is the world's leading per capita emitter of mercury. So guess what? In 2009, Colombian President Uribe was nominated as the Gold Mercury Award winner. And here you have a picture of him receiving his gold statue, surrounded by these delegates of that important event. And I might be the only one that sees the world upside down, but if you can explain that one to me, I'll be most obliged. And when I first arrived to Colombia, I had a pretty good opinion of President Uribe. I think he did very well on some areas, but when it comes to his policies on mining, I don't think he deserves that award by any means. He has pretty much sold out the country to these large multinational companies, and that's truly despicable, to say the least. Okay, let's move on quickly. The fate of mercury in aquatic systems. As you can see, this is a not very scientific cartoon, but it basically illustrates what happens to mercury regardless of the species and how it finds its way into the aquatic system. Sooner or later, it's going to find its way into the food web. Usually it needs prior conversion to methyl mercury, which is the bioavailable form for in any living creature. And here is another excellent cartoon. Here we have a grandpa fish, and if you can imagine, just see, he's getting mercury almost all the way up to his eyebrows. Fish don't have a very good capacity to eliminate mercury. So basically, the older the animal is, the higher concentrations of mercury they're going to have on their system. And if you enjoy recreational fishing, you might be a little bit, you might be surprised to see that many states have mercury advisories. And it might not be all that good to have too much fish out of particular lakes. Many lakes with many of those advisories will divide the amount of fish that you can ingest in different groups, depending on how susceptible you are and how much concentration the fish has, depending on the species and the age. So if we were to say that you caught a fish and it falls within the category 4, that fish will probably have more than 1 part per million, which is the action level established or recommended by FDA for doing whatever you want with that fish, except for making sure it doesn't find its way to your stomach. So with regards to the fish advisories for mercury, here are some of them. They have a tolerable weekly intake of 0.3 milligrams on an adult human. That's according to World Health Organization. And as you can see here, we have a list of different countries with how much limit they put on what should be on a permissible or recommended on a fish. FDA has a 1 part per million action level, and we could ask 2 questions. Why are the advices on a weekly instead of a daily basis? And the other one is, how do they come up with those values? Uh, the first, I'm going to try to answer those two questions. The first one, why weekly and not daily intake advices? Well, first, it's easier to level of zero point 0.2 milligrams per week is easier kind of to wrap around your head and easily understood than a level of 0.028 milligrams per day. And the other one has to do with the accumulation curve for methyl mercury in man or humans. Mercury has a very long half-life of about 50 days, and this is just in blood. In other tissues, it might be even longer. Uh, but basically, what that is telling you that if you were to ingest a little bit of, it tends to stay very stable in your blood from one day to the next. It's not going to vary too much, and the body is having trouble to get rid of that mercury. So if you were to ingest a little bit every day, uh, basically it would build up, and the total amount that you'd be ingesting would be very similar to uh, in, having consumed that same amount in just one intake at the end of that week. And so that's why they have weekly and not daily advices. The other thing interesting on this graph is that we need to reach a total dose of 100 milligrams before we start developing these signs. The dose makes the poison, and because of the long half-life of mercury, if we were to ingest the same amount of mercury every day, it would take several months before we reach what's called a steady state concentrations, in which the amount that goes out is the same of the amount that goes in. For example, let's say we were to assume that we're ingesting 200 grams of fish every day, of fish containing 10 parts per million. Well, we would start and this is the line representing the concentrations in blood. As you can see, we would start getting higher in concentrations in blood to a point that we reach the toxic dose. And as you can see, it's going to take between 50 and 100 days for you to reach that level. Okay, and that's pretty much what happened on that Minamata epidemic that took place in the 50s and 60s in Japan. People were ingesting seafood that contained several dozens parts per million of mercury, and within a few months they started showing signs due to toxicity. And as you can see, the first signs that will show up is paresthesias, which is basically a tingling feeling, like if they were poking you with needles on your feet, or if you were to fall asleep on an arm and then when you wake up it hurts. Basically you develop alterations on sensations throughout your body. And the bottom sentence summarizes this graph. The symptoms will appear in weeks, months when a total dose of 100 milligrams is reached in humans, and the speed to reach that point depends on the total intake, obviously in parts per million in that fish, and how many grams you're going to ingest. Now, the other question that we were posing is how in the world do they come up with those values? Well, the regulatory agencies do what's called a risk assessment, and they need two pieces of information for that. They need to know about the toxicity of the particular compound and how much exposure you need to receive to get close to the toxicity level. So basically, they used studies on people that were exposed to methyl mercury, and here is that one that they selected for coming up with the mercury advisories. It was a study done on this population, and they basically took 700 mother-infant pairs. These women consume a lot of fish, 12 meals a week, and they don't really ingest alcohol and tobacco, so that's good because those are two confounders that they didn't have to deal with on the study. and basically they monitor the growth and the development of their children for 5 years. And the highest women in that group had a concentration of methyl mercury of 15 parts per million in hair, and basically they use the most sensitive endpoint for methyl mercury is the developing brain in fetuses, and obviously in the children as they grow up if they've been exposed throughout pregnancy, uh, and what they did is they from that concentration in hair that was taken at parturition, they determined how much mercury those women were being ingesting throughout their pregnancy, and the way they go about doing that is it's illustrated on this formula. Here they convert from blood concentrations into a daily dietary intake, and before they do that they have to convert from hair concentrations to blood concentrations, and as you can see on this upper graph, there is a very good correlation, which is linear, between concentrations in hair and concentrations in blood. Hair has about 250 times higher concentration than blood. So from here they estimated that those women were ingesting 0.06 milligrams of methyl mercury every day, and because neither one of those children developed problems, neurobehavioral problems, which is the most sensitive endpoint for methyl mercury, they call that the no observed adverse effect level. Now the next step is to plot or build a safety factor to that value to account for, let's say, more sensitive individuals that were not included on that population. And from there, the way they do that is they divide by an uncertainty factor. In this case, it was 4.5, and they came up with total daily intake of 0.01 milligrams per day, which is the same as 0.1 milligrams per week. So that would be the amount that women can ingest weekly and still not develop problems on its future offspring due to methyl mercury exposure. Now that same idea is plotted here, how they derive the basically that recommendation point from the no observed adverse effect level, and you can just read it here. They use an uncertainty factor to come up with total daily intake. And just to wrap up the presentation, I would like to say a study that I found on mercury in fish from the Buenaventura Bay. That's that bay where the Dagua River is draining, and this came out in 2010, 1 year after that ordeal of started taking place in the river, and they collected some fish from the bay, and they were measuring how much mercury they have. Neither one of them had 1 part per million, which is the action level established by FDA. But remember that what's being dumped on that river is elemental mercury, and that might take several years, if not decades, to convert into methyl mercury, which is the one that is going to pass on to the food web. Now these levels are, I didn't find these levels in a reputable journal, and I don't know about how competent these scientists are, so I cannot really attest of how credible these values are. But nonetheless, they raise an alarm that we might be confronting another Minamata disease in the near future. And what I would suggest is to do a proposal, and on that proposal I will be taking measurements of mercury in river sediments near the mouth of that river, and I will be selecting some seafood and doing studies, and the criteria for selecting which animals to test would be determined by the position on their food web. As I said, the older and the carnivore species will build up higher concentrations than many of the other animals down lower on the food chain. The age of the fish, whether they are sedentary, like for example oysters, clams, crabs, those are going to reflect better the concentrations that are at a particular site than fish that will migrate and go to different places. And obviously I would include the fish that are most commonly eaten by people there, which ones they're going to have on their meal plate every day. Now, having said this, it's been an honor to be part of this course. I think everybody was very enthusiastic about learning everything, and I wish the most success to everybody on their future career, whether you're young or a little older. But in any ways, if I come across you, and it'll be a pleasure to interact and maybe collaborate on your future endeavors. So take care, and good luck. Bye-bye.